sleeping, one eye open. Too smart cause I'm always scoping, watching, seeing how these lames look lazy. This how you get your frame took. Money, I got money. Money, I got money.
Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about 200 Years of American Financial Panics by Thomas P. Vartanian. This is about crashes, recessions, depressions, and the technology that will change it all. But before I talk about this, I wanted to give you an update about bees. About a month ago, I read and then did a review on the book Buzz. It was recommended by Beth Ann. Dr. Beth Ann, a scientist on bees and pollination, I believe. I felt the need to go out and get houses for bees. Now, these are houses for solitary bees, basically just tubes that a female bee can make a nest in. This is not a hive. It's not something you would do to make honey. It's really just something you do to help a bee out. So I did that. We bought 2 bee houses, mason bee houses, and we put one in our front yard and one in our backyard. And then we just watched, and nothing happened for a month. And I thought maybe it was too late of the year. It just wasn't going to happen. So I was kind of over it, but I was going to leave them up just in case. And then one day, a couple days ago, I was taking Noelia to go get dinner, and we walked out the front, and I saw a little bit of movement in front of the bee house. And I took a picture, and I was all excited. We went to eat dinner, came back. I looked again, and I was like, shit, that's a yellow jacket. And I don't want a yellow jacket because yellow jackets are mean. And when I Googled yellow jackets, the first thing I found was how yellow jackets are especially mean in the early fall. And this is right in front of our front door. So I tweeted to Beth Ann. First I tweeted, I think we got a bee. And then I tweeted, oh no, it's a yellow jacket. Oh shoot. And in my mind, I was thinking we're gonna have to go kill this yellow jacket. Do something to move it. Because I don't want a bunch of yellow jackets at the front door, stinging everybody. And maybe around 11 p.m. or midnight, Beth Ann replied to my tweet with, that is a bee. And she told me what kind it is. And then I Googled the scientific name, genus, and I found that it was a wool carder bee. I was so excited that I could not sleep. And I did not fall asleep until 1 a.m. I watched so many videos about wool carder bees. I was telling my wife about it. I was just excited. And then we named our wool carder bee. We think she's a European wool carder bee. We named her Lynda Carder. And I had this video prepared for this because I was going to have to talk about this book. And we were all excited. I told Noelia the next morning. She was excited because we had thought there was a wasp that night. And so she got excited. We named her. We started watching her. I went out a few times on Friday to look at her, see what she was doing. It was really cool to know that it was the same bee that would fly off and then come back and build some more of her nest and fly off and come back. We were so excited. And then we went to my sister-in-law's house, and then we came home late. I expected to see Lynda sleeping in one of the tubes, and she wasn't there. She was gone. She never returned home. So the next morning, when I woke up, I went down and looked again. She was still not there. I looked back a few more times. I asked Beth Ann what may have happened. We don't know. There's a chance that Lynda may have gone away to build nests in other places, just to kind of add some variety to her nesting sites for survival's sake. So it's not all her eggs in one basket, basically. But we don't know. She could have been eaten by a bird. She could have been hit by a car. She should have been attacked by something else, like a wasp. We just don't know. So we made some flyers, which Noelia and I put around our neighborhood. And that's where it is. The good thing is she made some nests and she probably laid some eggs. So in like 10 months, we may have some baby, well, full-grown European wool carder bees that are going to hatch from our house in the front. And if that happens, we'll be real excited. Noah's already talked about what we're going to name them. They'll have the last name Carter. But that's it. That's the update. We went from a high to a low to a high to a low, and then just kind of neutral because we don't know what happened to her. We're not sure she died. We just know she never came home. So Lynda, if you're watching this, come home, please. We have a nice house for you. Thank you for laying your eggs. So, 200 years of American financial panics. What is this about? Well, it's focused on banking regulators in the United States. It's focused on their actions and past panics that have regularly happened. It really starts with the S&L, the savings and loan crisis in the 80s, early 90s, and then talks about a number of financial panics and recessions through the 1800s, through early 1900s, then the crash in 1929, and the resulting depression, and then we get to the S&L crisis again, and then the 2008 financial crisis and the 2020 financial pandemic. Yeah, this was published in 2021. Thomas Vartanian worked for the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is an independent office in the Department of the Treasury in the United States. Then he also worked for the FHLBB, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, which no longer exists. It was kind of folded into other organizations. What Thomas Vartanian is arguing is that financial regulators, specifically in this book, banking regulators, the banking regulators in the United States are the Federal Reserve, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, the National Credit Union Administration, NCUA, the OCC, which is the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and am I forgetting any? And then a number of state banking regulators. There are also other financial regulators like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Federal Housing Finance Agency. Now I'm worried I'm forgetting one. There's a lot. There's a lot of them. It's an alphabet soup. Vartanian is basically saying is that as these organizations have added banking regulations to the books, it's changed the incentive structure for the entities that are being regulated, the banks, or bank-like institutions. And the fact that it's turned into a rule-based, kind of check-the-box approach to regulation has really incentivized the organizations that are regulated to check the boxes and then get around it as much as they can. I think Vartanian would say that he's not making excuses for the regulated entities, although there are times where it feels like he's looking over some pretty glaring poor decisions by banks. He's not necessarily making excuses for them. He's just saying that books that discuss the shortcomings of the banks already exist, and he wants to put in this book more of a focus on the regulators. So he brings up specific instances throughout history in the United States where something the regulators did, or, and I think this is sometimes more of his point in this book, stuff that Congress forced the regulators to do, didn't really address the actions in the financial markets, in the banking institutions, that really highlighted political desires from Congress, and that Congress was looking into things that they weren't really informed enough to look into, and then trying to address things that really scratched the political itch without addressing the real financial realities. And that approach has really ignored how all these different solutions to past crises have just created new incentives for entities being regulated and kind of sowed the seeds for future crises. I didn't agree with everything in this book. I think there is some validity to what he discusses about incentives and how institutions are going to react to incentives. But I think he also, sometimes it feels like he's removing a lot of that responsibility from the organizations with the introduction of, let's say, moral hazard. Moral hazard being that a bank knows that it's going to be bailed out, the bank knows it's going to be rescued, so it takes greater risks than it can really survive, with the idea that there's going to be something backstopping it, the government. The moral hazard is that it shouldn't have done that, but it knows that it's going to be bailed out. So it's willing to be a risky institution because some of that risk is mitigated by the actions of the government. And that relies on the government being willing to bail it out. This goes back to the too big to fail phenomenon, or systemically important financial institutions. So it's really a look at instances where actions by Congress and certain regulators, especially actions by Congress, throughout history have created incentives. The big one that Thomas Vartanian talks about is the savings and loan crisis, because he was there for that. So he saw it. He saw how the incentives created new problems, which resulted in actions by the government, which then created even more problems, and it just built up and built up and built up, and eventually turned into a collapse of the savings and loan industry, kind of reorganization of part of the regulatory framework. I gave this book 3 stars. I kind of rate financial business economics books differently than my other books because I feel like I know a little bit more about them. So I'm harsher with them. So 3 is good. I think some of the arguments made were a little open, a little weak sometimes. Also, it's interesting that the cover has all this Bitcoin stuff on here because there wasn't a whole lot of the discussion on digital currency. There's some, but I'm not sure if there's enough to really warrant this. This may just be somebody in marketing saying, hey, digital currencies are a big deal. Throw some Bitcoins on the front of there and you'll sell some more books. I don't know. I liked it. I liked the history of especially some of the early financial panics and recessions from the 1800s and the reasoning behind those panics or recessions, because they're really not a whole lot about some of those 1800s, and they happened fairly regularly. Like every 20 years there was a real financial panic, and there was issues with money supply and banking at the state and national level. So where I've read books, often the focus is on 1907, early 1900s, the big one, 1929, savings and loan, sometimes 87, early 2000s, 2008. And that's kind of what the focus has been. Going back further to the 1800s I thought it was interesting. And then reading about the savings and loan crisis is also something that I've done a couple times, but not that frequently. So it is nice to kind of return to that, kind of get a refresher in savings and loans and some of the organizations that existed before, some of the regulatory organizations that existed. So I gave it 3 stars. I recommend it. I thought it was interesting. It is focused on banking regulators, so it's going to be focused on the regulations. It's going to be focused on law. It's going to be focused on the actual regulatory institutions, but not all financial regulators, just the banking regulators, with some brief references to other regulators. There's a lot of stuff about banking regulators out there, but this is the first one I've read that really kind of takes them all on, instead of either focusing on a crisis or focusing on a specific either leader or institution. So 200 Years of American Financial Panics. Check it out. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool read. It is a little long. It's not as long as I thought it was going to be. I don't know if it was made with really thick pages or what. I thought it was going to be a lot longer. It was 400 something pages. So not too bad. Thanks for being here today. Lynda Carder, if you're out there and you're seeing this, please come home. Come back to your house and build some more nests. We miss you. All right, thanks. Bye.
My tea's gone cold, I'm wondering why I got out of bed at all. The morning rain clouds up my window, and I can't see it all. And even if I could, it'll all be great. But your picture